can either be acute or they can be chronic. They can be uncomplicated or they may be complicated with certain complications, which we will be seeing later. So there is a whole list of acute infections, chronic infection, and some other infections which may fall in between. They may present acutely or they may have a chronic course. So first of all, we should know that imaging is not required in suspected uncomplicated UTIs. You will not get anything by doing imaging. Indication of imaging in suspected cases of UTI is if the patient is unusually symptomatically more severe than you usually expect. Patient has been given IV antibiotics, however, he failed to respond within 72 hours. Or if there is high risk, like the patients are elderly, patients are diabetic, patients are immunocompromised, or there are multiple repeated infections within a short span of time. So here you would like to find out the reason for the repeated infections. So what is the role of imaging? What a radiologist is expected to do? You should be able to help the clinicians in early diagnosis and treatment. Then you should detect acute complications which, if not being addressed immediately, may give rise to sepsis, generalized sepsis, and patient may deteriorate immediately. Then ultrasound and CT both can help us in guiding intervention radiology procedures, which I'll be coming a little later. Then predisposing factor. Is there any underlying stone, any underlying stricture, or there is an underlying vesico-ureteric reflux? Because of this, the patient has landed into these renal infections. Or are there any long-term complications which are due to these renal infections? So these are the role of imaging. So what are the different imaging modalities available in our armamentarium? First is plain radiography. Plain radiography is usually not done now as a first line of treatment. Maybe if a patient is already having some intervention or some catheter to see its position, you may require plain radiography, but not as an imaging modality to diagnose renal infection as such. IVU still has a role, especially in two conditions: papillary necrosis and then early changes of renal tuberculosis. It is still a valid modality to detect those. Ultrasound, as we all know, it's the initial screening modality of choice. It's radiation free, it's widely available, and there are certain conditions like pyonephrosis, renal abscesses, which you can diagnose with confidence on ultrasound, whereas stones, you can, especially renal stones, you will be able to pick up on ultrasound. The sensitivities would be less in ureteric stones or if the system is not dilated. CECT is considered the gold standard. Usually an NCCT is performed to look for hemorrhage or calculus and followed by an MDCT. Nephrographic phase is usually done. Obstruction, if suspected, then excretory phase is also required. However, if obstruction is not suspected, then NCCT and nephrographic phase will give you answer most of the time. Of course, the imaging can be tailored to the protocol depending upon the clinical condition in which patient is in. MRI is usually reserved for pregnant women and in children and in diabetic, in which giving contrast is an issue, and in pregnant women and children in which you cannot give radiation. Diffusion weighted images is found to be very sensitive for detection certain renal infections. However, as we all know, the presence of gas and the presence of stones will lead to decrease in the sensitivity of MRI as an imaging modality tool. So first of all, you should know that all renal acute infection, they have similar clinical pictures. They will present as fever, patient will have chills, flank and groin pain, frequent urination, burning sensation on pain when urinating, nausea and vomiting. So patient will have constellation of these symptoms in more or less similar way, but the radiologically picture may be different. So look, just to show you one image. So this patient presented with this acute flank pain and symptoms. So what do we see here? We see a kidney which appears enlarged, which appears globular, and we can see that there are areas of increased and decreased echogenicity, and we can also see that there is some urothelial thickening and some debris within it. So this is the classical picture of acute pyelonephritis. However, we should know that in most of the patient in acute pyelonephritis, ultrasound may be completely normal. It may not show you anything, or it may be just present with an enlarged globular kidney and nothing else. So that bring us to the imaging modality of choice, that is CECT. So in CECT, what we see kidneys which are enlarged, like in this patient, both the kidneys are enlarged, they are globular. And another feature is extensive perinephric standing. So you can see that extensive perinephric standing is there. In addition, we can see these alternate hyper and hypoattenuating bands within the renal parenchyma. So this is akin to striated nephrogram, which we used to see. So this, why does this appearance happen? It happens because of the presence of obstruction of the tubule by the inflammatory process. In addition, there is an interstitial edema, and in addition, there is vasospasm. So all these three combine to give you this striated nephrogram kind of picture, which is typical of acute pyelonephritis. So acute pyelonephritis is an inflammation collecting system, renal interstitium, usually ascending, can also be hematogenous if the patient is a IV drug abuser, or if the patient is having infective endocarditis. Sexually active women, and also in the men over 60 years, because of the presence of BPH, urinary stasis is there, which can lead to more chances of these people getting acute pyelonephritis. And as I mentioned, underlying causes, that is where imaging has to play a role. A patient is having obstruction, congenital anomalies, diabetic patient, these are the patients who are more prone for acute pyelonephritis, and 10% of the acute pyelonephritis may be recurrent. So now diffuse homogeneous involvement. If you see that whole of the renal parenchyma is diffusely hypodense, then it usually means that there is a ureteric obstruction. Acute pyelonephritis as such will not cause the change in characteristic of whole of the kidney. That whole of the kidney will not appear hypodense. Secondary signs, again, a role. CT has very important role. Perinephric standing, thickening of Girotta fascias, renal and perineal abscesses formation will be picked up beautifully by CT. MRI will show diffusion restriction, and many studies have shown us that diffusion restriction is more sensitive than the T2 weighted images on contrast enhanced T1 weighted images for detecting regions of pyelonephritis. Another patient, this is a different patient, same site, same clinical symptoms, but what do we see here? We see that the kidney is enlarged. In addition, we can see that there is a hypoechoic lesion seen within the kidney. The lesion is a thick, irregular, shaggy margins, and in addition, we can see there are some internal echoes within it, and there is also posterior acoustic enhancement. So if we make the patient move, and if usually these mobile echoes are mobile, then the diagnosis is clinched. It's nothing else but the renal abscess. So if we do a CT, so this is how a renal abscess will look. On NCCT, it will generally be hypodense. Sometimes it may not be very well appreciated on NCCT, and if we give contrast, we can see the typical irregular peripheral rim-like enhancement of abscesses, which is similar to the abscesses anywhere in the body. And in addition, you can also see reduced enhancement, some chances of acute pyelonephritis, and also we can see perinephric inflammation, which is characteristic of these renal abscesses. So sometimes these renal abscesses may not remain limited to the kidney, but they may come out of the kidney, and they may extend into perinephric and paranephric space. An important point is that when it remains within the kidney, the abscess is usually unilocular, but when it comes into the retroperitoneum, because of that, it develops multiple septa because of the retroperitoneum is not a free space. So draining an abscess which is limited only to the kidney is relatively easy, but now if it has extended into the perinephric space, drainage is little more difficult. So another young child presented with similar symptoms. What do we see here? This is a T1 image. We see T1 intense lesion. The lesion is T2 hyperintense. These are the axial and coronal image. And if you see diffusion and ADC, the lesion shows diffusion restriction at the periphery, and it also shows peripheral thin rim line enhancement, quite characteristic of a renal abscess. So now coming to another interesting entity. So the patient, again, same symptoms, acute pyelonephritis is suspected, but when you do an ultrasound, the ultrasound was normal. Patient underwent CT, and you see there is a wedge-like area of hypoenhancement which is extended from the renal sinus till the periphery. So this is a wedge-shaped lesion. It may not always be wedge-shaped, but you can see a little globular area. It is also associated with little perinephric standing, which may not be seen all the time. So this is nothing else but an entity which is known as acute focal bacterial pyelonephritis. It was first described by Rosenfield. Earlier, it was called as acute lobar nephronia. That is the pyelonephritis which is limited to a small part of the kidney. clinical features similar to acute pyelonephritis if the lesion remain neglected for some time, or if the patient receives some antibiotics. Typical clinical features may not be there, and then it becomes a great mimicker. So acute focal bacterial pyelonephritis, it can mimic abscess, but as we have seen abscess, in abscess there will be peripheral irregular enhancement and there will be central liquefaction, which will not be there in acute focal bacterial pyelonephritis. In tumor, usually mass effect would be there. There will be some internal enhancement, whereas AFBN will not show you that kind of mass effect which is seen in the tumor. Clinical picture is usually different. Acute focal bacterial pyelonephritis can also mimic infarct, and this is actually one of the most common entity with which it is confused. So in this subgroup of patients, there is a sign which helps us, that is the cortical rim sign. So what happens is, in acute focal bacterial pyelonephritis, inflammation extends from the renal sinus till all the way to the cortex, whereas in renal infarct, this is a patient of renal infarct, you will see that there is a thin rim of enhancement which is persistent. So this sign is helpful in differentiating renal infarct and acute focal bacterial pyelonephritis. And this cortical rim sign, it happens because the periphery of the renal capsule, cortex is supplied by perforating branches from the capsular artery, which is an early branch of the renal artery. So this perfusion is maintained. It does not undergo infarction because it's an early branch of the renal artery. Another patient, this patient is diabetic, he is immunocompromised, and you try to do ultrasound for this patient and you see this echogenic contents within it. So on first look, you may think that there is a large staghorn calculus, but if you see carefully, you will see that the shadow which is there is not as bright as clean, which happens in the stones, whereas it is a dirty shadow because of this reverberation artifact, and you cannot make out any other thing. So this echogenic shadow within a kidney on ultrasound with dirty acoustic shadow is quite characteristic of emphysematous pyelonephritis. So you should not label this as stones. Sometimes what happens is that this infection can be very extensive. It may extend into perinephric space. Then you may not see the kidney itself altogether. So which is known as gassed out kidney. So if a diabetic immunocompromised patient, you see air in the expected location of kidney and you don't see kidney, always keep this possibility in mind, and it's better if you do a CT. So if you do NC-CT or CCT, you can see this multiple air loculi which are seen in the CT. CT helps because it tells you about the extent amount of gas, which will not be told by ultrasound. It also tells you about the fluid collection which is there associated, and it will also tell whether the infection is limited to the kidney or it has gone into the perinephric space. So it is a rare severe fulminant sepsis, infection with gas forming organism. Radiological hallmark is gas in the collecting system, and predisposing factors are immunocompromised. So this is just a spotter. You can see this extensive gas in the renal fossa, and if you do CT, you can see this extensive air, and we can easily drain them in the same setting. So there is a type 1 and type 2. In type 1, more than 1/3 renal parenchymal destruction is there. Mottled or streaky areas of gas are there, whereas type 2 fluid collection is more. So type 1 is the one which is considered more dangerous and has the worst prognosis. So there is a classification which is known as the Huang-Seng CT classification system. It just tells you about the extent of the emphysematous pyelonephritis. In class 1, gas is limited only to the collecting system. 2, renal parenchyma. On 3, there is a perinephric extension. 3B is along with paranephric extension. And class 4, if there is a bilateral emphysematous pyelonephritis or a solitary kidney with emphysematous pyelonephritis. So as the class increases, you will see that the disease become more bad and the prognosis becomes worse. So another similar clinical pictures, but here what we see on ultrasound, we see that the system is dilated, PCS is dilated, and you see multiple internal echoes within the PCS. So there are actually no much differential here. The diagnosis is pyonephrosis. Usually urine should be jet black. If you see mobile internal echoes within it, then your diagnosis is pyonephrosis. So now pyonephrosis is one condition which require urgent diagnosis as well as urgent treatment. So we being radiologists or intervention radiologists, when you see this kind of picture on ultrasound, just don't try to find out the cause there and then, that why this obstruction is there. If possible, try to drain this system. You can put a PCN catheter, let this pus come out, and then maybe you can come later and try to find out what is the cause of this obstruction. But this is the medical emergency, pyonephrosis, obstructed system. It has to be drained, otherwise patient lands in sepsis immediately. So and I just told you, suppurative dissection, renal parenchyma may occur, and obstruction causes stone, section, neoplasm, all can happen. So now moving from acute to the chronic inflammatory conditions. So renal parenchymal scarring is the hallmark of chronic pyelonephritis. There is thinning of cortex and medulla, and underlying calyx is blunted. So etiology, if it is basically in children and young adults, vesico-ureteric reflux is found to be the more common cause. So it's a non-obstructive cause. It is also known as reflux nephropathy. Whereas if it occurs because of some obstruction, most common cause is stone. It is known as obstructive. The cause is obstruction, and it's known as chronic pyelonephritis. Sometimes, if acute focal bacterial pyelonephritis, which I showed you, it does not. It persists. So patient may present with that chronic pyelonephritis. One important thing is that if one imaging scars have been demonstrated, then there is no need of doing images again and again unless the clinical picture markedly become different, because the picture will remain same. Some areas will show parenchymal thinning, parenchymal loss, underlying calyx may be dilated, and the other areas of the kidney may show hypertrophy. Sometimes compensatory hypertrophy. Sometimes these the areas of compensatory hypertrophy, they can become very globular, and you may think that they are tumors. So they are known as the pseudotumors. And if you do a contrast study, you will see that their enhancement pattern is typically similar to the rest of the kidneys, and they are not the tumor, but the pseudotumors. So sometimes, the involvement of scars, pattern of scar can give you an idea of the etiologies. So this is how a normal kidney would look like. If in between the calyx there is scar, so the reason for this scar was probably a renal infarct. If you see that there is a scar here, but the underlying calyx is dilated and blunted, so this would be usually because of obstruction. Whereas if if dilatation is there, but it is in the polar part, then the reflux nephropathy is usually the culprit. Another chronic inflammatory condition which we must know is xanthogranulomatous pyelonephritis. It's a chronic granulomatous inflammation. So here what happens is, because of a chronic long-going inflammatory process, the renal parenchyma is destroyed by paraamniosalicylic pass-positive lipid-laden macrophages, which are known as xanthoma cells. That's why the term is known as xanthogranulomatous pyelonephritis. Etiology would be Proteus, E. coli, and Pseudomonas. These are the organisms which may lead to this severe fulminant, slow-growing but potentially damaging clinical condition. Triad is seen on imaging, on which there is a poorly defined renal mass. There is no contrast excretion or reduced, and there is a Staghorn calculus. On ultrasound, you can see a Staghorn calculus. You will see these multiple cavities within the renal parenchyma. So these are actually the dilated calyx which are filled with pus and necrosis, which have over the time also destroyed the renal parenchyma, leading to this all inflammatory process. Renal shape is more or less maintained. So sometimes it can present with this typical bear paw sign, which you may see with the Staghorn calculus. Important thing to note is that renal pelvis is usually not dilated. It's either normal or it's maybe a little inflamed because of inflammation. It may be little narrow in caliber, and you see this poorly enhancing renal kidney, multiple these ill-defined areas within the kidney. So this is nothing else but xanthogranulomatous pyelonephritis. If only kidney is involved, stage 1. If inflammatory process extends into the Zerotas fascia, stage 2, and perinephric would be stage 3. Renal tuberculosis, most common site of extrapulmonary TB is GU-TB. It has insidious onset, no specific symptoms. Spread is usually hematogenous. BCG can cause renal lesions via reflux if BCG treatment is given for renal for this bladder cancer patient. So that 0.01% of these patients may land into tuberculosis because of BCG. So if we understand the pathology, we will understand the imaging features. Mycobacteria is there in bloodstream. Granulomas form in the cortex of both the kidney, in the glomeruli as well as periglomeruli capillaries, because of very good blood circulation there and presence of good oxygenation. So spontaneous, if the patient is fine, if the person is immunologically okay. So these undergo spontaneous resolution, complete healing may occur, sometimes may occur with fibrosis and calcification. If it does not undergo spontaneously healing, sometimes these tuberculomas, granulomas can remain dormant for a large period of time, like from 10 years to like 20 and 30 years. And when the immunity goes down, they enlarge and form these tuberculomas kind of picture. So if they rupture into the nephrons, TB bacilliuria may occur, granulomas may form in calyx, pelvis, ureter. They may heal with ulceration, and when these ulceration heal, there would be chronic inflammatory changes and strictures. So hydronephrosis, infundibular strictures, hiked up pelvics, hydrocalyptosis. So hiked up pelvics, infundibular strictures, hydrocalyptosis, these are actually quite typical of renal tuberculosis. No other infection causes this kind of picture. If these granulomas, they involve the medulla and papilla, so they may give rise to papillary necrosis. They may form cavities, and then they may communicate with pelvis calyceal system. From cortex, they may go outside, rupture into perinephric space and form perinephric abscesses. So this is a beautiful article in ISRI. Those of you who have not gone through it, they can go through it. So all the imaging features are very well described in the single picture. So you can get papillary necrosis, you can get calcifications, callysis, you can get hiked up pelvis, you can get ureteric strictures, and you can get intra-urethral stricture, lymph nodes. So we will see few of these findings. IVU, as I just told you, is still relevant in imaging early tuberculosis. Earliest finding, which is described in minimal calyceal dilatation with mild loss of calyceal sharpness. Loss of sharpness and fuzziness, which is known as moth-eaten appearance, may occur. Irregular early calcification, cavitation may also be seen. So just to show you one case from the literature, here we can see that there is a rugged papillary moth-eaten kind of appearance. So this is the early changes which are known in early tuberculosis, whereas on this side you can see there is a infundibular stricture. You can also see there is a pelvic stricture, and there is a pelvis has lost its usual anatomy. So these are typical of renal tuberculosis. So patient may have an old tuberculosis, may develop new tuberculosis again if immunity goes down. Another patient, here we can see that there is an infundibular stricture is here. There is a cavity which is communicating with this infundibulum, and then there is no calyx at the expected location of the calyx, which is known as phantom calyx. So if the infection remains persistent, so we all know the kidney will go on extensive lobar calcification. Autonephrectomy, this is known as putty kidney. It is the end stage disease, end stage of renal tuberculosis. CT findings in tuberculosis: granulomas, abscesses, urothelial thickening. So CT findings will depend whether the tuberculosis has involved basically the collecting system or the parenchymal, or the parenchyma involvement is more, or both of them are there. Early findings may be urothelial thickening, and the small granulomas, which are very small. Kidney will show poor enhancement because functional derangement is more than which is visual to eye. So in another patient, you can see that there is calyceal dilatation, but it is not regular. Upper polar calyx are more dilated, lower polar calyx are relatively preserved, and there is this pelvis is also hiked up. And in addition, you can see there is a ureteric thickening, and the bladder is also appears to be less capacious, and it also showing thickening. So this constellation of findings is characteristic and will go with the diagnosis of tuberculosis. In another patient, what do we see here? There is a ill-defined, poorly marginated lesion in the upper pole. The lesion has ruptured into the perinephric space, and collection is there, perinephric collection. In addition, we can see there are lesions in liver. In addition, we can also see there is a necrotic lymphadenopathy. So if you get this kind of inflammation changes, you know that you are dealing with tuberculosis. Vis-a-vis another patient, this was a young male, 23-year-old male. You see there is a lesion here, ill-defined, irregular marginated, hypodense, not actually fitting into any of the known entity. However, patient was young, the lesion was hypo-enhancing. So we actually we did ultrasound. So on ultrasound, the lesion was echogenic. The lesion is, these margins are very irregular. On Doppler, there was vascularity within the lesion. We also did CUS for the patient, and the lesion was because actually we were trying to rule out malignancy. So when we did so, the lesion was again irregular, hypo enhancing in all the phases. So we thought that probably we may not be dealing with the tuberculosis. So we ended up doing the biopsy, and it turned out to be granulomatous inflammation. Another entity which we should be familiar with is fungal infection. Usually almost all the patient will be deranged, immunity will be deranged, diabetic, renal transplant, other chronic inflammation. And Mucor and Aspergillus candida, these are the regular culprits. So what do we see? We see that both the kidneys would be enlarged. They will be having multiple hypodense areas which are involving both the cortex and medulla. Renal parenchymal enhancement would be poor. There would be perinephric inflammation. There will be formation of both the infarcts as well as necrosis. Inflammation is very severe, and you see that it has also involved the descending colon, which is not showing any enhancement. So basically, these Mucor, Aspergillus, all are angio-invasive fungus. They cause the thrombosis of large as well as smaller renal arteries and renal veins, which give rise to this kind of fulminant infarctions and necrosis. Prognosis is usually very, very poor, and unless patient can be offered a nephrectomy, these patients usually demise. Another infection. So this was an ultrasound, and this is the CT. It was reported as a cystic RCC, but if you look carefully, you see a speck of calcification here. This doesn't look like septa. So we thought that probably we were dealing with some parasitic infection. So this actually a renal hydatid. Intrarenal hydatid are rare. Sometimes they grow rapidly, may destroy kidney. In other patients, they may grow very slowly. So if you tend to do an MR in this patient, you can see the typical hydatid cyst as it appears in any other organ. You can see these are well-defined daughter cysts within the lesion. It doesn't look like septa, but these are all daughter cysts. Sometimes they may rupture into PCS, like in this patient, cause hydronephrosis, and these hydatid daughter cysts and was all actually come down involving all the urinary system till the lower ureter. So imaging is not needed in suspected uncomplicated patients. However, if the patient is susceptible, imaging threshold should be less. Ultrasound is the initial modality. CT is the mainstay. MRI would be done if concern for radiation is there. Most of the time you will get a diagnosis with radiology, but if you don't get, then at least you can point towards a particular pathology, and you may do either biopsy or a clinical correlation to make a correct diagnosis. Thank you for a very patient hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Ujjwal.